Welcome to In the Deep. I'm your host, Catherine Ingram. The following short selection is the opening talk and first question and answer from a longer session of Dharma Dialogues, originally titled Your Song of Nobility. It was recorded on Maui in 2010. Good evening, everyone. There's a tribe in Africa which has the practice, many of you have probably heard this story, it's a true story, has the practice of when a woman is pregnant, she and some of the members of the tribe, usually other women, go somewhere apart and they chant and they wait for the song of the child, the name of the child and the song of the child. And the name and the song have a nobility of spirit, a particular one for this particular child. The chant is done only a few times in the life of this person. At the conception, at birth, at rite of passage around 13, and at death. But there's one other exceptional time that the chant is used, and that is when this person has committed an egregious act, has done something quite terrible, not just a small infraction, but something quite bad. And when that happens, they take that person and they put him in the circle, in the center of the circle, and the whole tribe chants his song and his name to remind him or her who he is, to remind him of his nobility of spirit. One can imagine that would be a very powerful experience, having your tribe chanting your song in a moment like that. Very different from being punished, obviously. Now, most of us did not grow up in such an African tribe, and we have to find our own song ourselves. And there is a great possibility of having that be the case. And perhaps our songs don't even have words or melody. Maybe they do, but not necessarily. We tend, by conditioning and by stress and by all kinds of ways, we tend to identify with the least noble aspects of ourselves sometimes. The neurotic story that just runs and runs and runs and has different components. Some people like to identify with their means of success. Some people like to identify by how they look or how accomplished their children are or the places they've been, how much money they have. People have all kinds of misidentifications when they're forgetting their song, maybe their silent song. Misidentifications. And strangely, often people are heavily identified and presenting a certain somebody to the world in the hope of being loved. That's actually what they want. Jack Cornfield and I were on this webcast last Sunday. He told a beautiful story, or he made a fantastic example, rather, of this Nobel Prize winner, I think his last name is Wald, who realized after winning the Nobel Prize that actually what he wanted was love, and the Nobel Prize was kind of a consolation prize. It's a nice consolation prize as they go, but so often we're identifying and presenting and building up and offering to the world, saying, look at me, honor me for this or that, because we want underneath to be loved. And we go around the bend to try to get there. And meanwhile, it's also a great misidentification of your true self. You're forgetting. You're forgetting who you are in your fundamental essence. What is an easy, obvious way to find your proper identification? Who are you really in the essence, in the simplicity, in the sweetness of love? Do you really need to work that hard at it? Or is it possible to just relax? My teacher used to always say that when you see this, you'll laugh. When you see it clearly, you'll laugh because you'll realize how simple it was all along. You'll laugh because you laugh at yourself. You think, wow, I was making something incredibly complicated that was actually very simple.
So this wanting to be loved.
Yes.
What's that about?
It's programmed. People want to be loved. Don't you?
Well, it's a question I'm asking myself right now. But it's something that I hear very often. Whether it's part of our awakened spirit or not, I don't know.
Well, forgetting awakened spirit, is it part of your human experience?
I would assume so, yes.
Yeah. And, from my vantage point, that's a wonderful thing.
There are, just like you told the story about that Nobel Prize winner, though, people will go to great lengths to achieve that feeling of being loved, or they'll feel their lives are incomplete without somehow getting that affirmation.
Yes.
And I don't know if that affirmation ever comes from the outside.
Well, you're right. I mean, it's certainly best to sit in your own well-being, your own sense of aliveness, your own appreciation, your own generating of love. That's best, of course. But it's very natural and very human to love the feeling of being loved. If you're strong enough in your own sense of who and what you are, it won't be an absolute necessity for your well-being that other people love you. It won't collapse you. It may not even diminish your spark very much, but it's very, very nice. It's nice to have. I mean, Punjaji once said, if no one comes to satsang, I'll have satsang with the breeze. I'll have satsang with the birds, right? But even that is, he's still wanting some company there. So, to understand that as a human being, it just feels very, very nice that you could call it a holy kind of yearning. And it may not be the case that, I could easily imagine situations or circumstances where someone is sitting very still in the center of their being, but not somehow attracting love. I often reflect on, through time and even in other cultures here and now as we sit here, there are people who are very like ourselves in terms of dialed into a certain simple frequency, but they're stuck in a culture where nobody else is getting that. And I grew up in a culture like that in the South, actually. And I was a misfit. I was definitely a misfit. And had I stayed there, I could imagine that I wouldn't necessarily have felt real appreciated, and that there would have been a certain yearning that was very unfulfilled. I was so lucky to be able to, I went off on this quest, on this search of my own, really not knowing if I would find any other like-minded characters out there. I've been incredibly lucky to find legions of them worldwide, because I've been able to travel and find and be on this and live in a culture that has this kind of freedom. But a lot of people, I've actually gotten a couple of emails, one from a woman in one of the Kazakhstan or somewhere like that, one of the stands, who wrote me a very touch. She had found a free thing I had on YouTube, on iTunes, and she wrote me this very deep and touching letter about her situation, which felt incredibly and profoundly lonely to her, and that she was just so delighted to know that there were other people in the world like her. But there she is in a culture. She didn't tell me much about her personal circumstances, but I could sense, So when you're not feeling, when you're sitting in the center of that love and that beauty, but you're not really feeling seen as that can feel quite lonely. There can be a heartbreak in that. One of my friends in Los Angeles, whenever I would say to him, "Nice to see you," he would always say, "Nice to be seen." and it's really like that. It's very nice to be seen for that deep essence that you are, that you don't have to present anything. That somebody who's on that frequency is looking at you and saying, same. I can meet this person in the place where there's not two. I can meet this person on a frequency that is very subtle. And it's delightful to meet that way. It's delicious. And then you can talk story, and it's not as, annoying. But when you're with someone who's presenting only story, have you ever been cornered at a party and someone just starts rapping at you, and you can sense they're trying to impress you. And they're just telling you this litany of either experiences or accomplishments or stuff, or and you feel kind of badgered. And it also, as I said a few weeks ago, it also starts stirring the movement of ego in you, which starts feeling yucky as well. And you're not meeting in that heaven realm. You're not meeting there. You're meeting on the level of ego presentation, which is incredibly unsatisfying. And yet, one can have so much compassion when you see it, if you can kind of step away from it, because you can then, especially if you could view it as if you could view it as a film, you would so clearly see, this person's trying to meet in some place that gives them a sense of connection, and they just don't know how to go about it. They haven't accessed it in themselves. And when you're with someone who does sit in that spot in themselves, it's just signaling to everyone else you can relax. It's signaling to everyone else you're okay just as you are, just relax. When you're with someone who sits in their own center like that, in their own generation of love, then, it starts to work as a tuning fork, and it starts to send the frequency out and pull that frequency in. This has been In the Deep with Catherine Ingram. If you would like to make a tax-deductible donation in support of these podcasts or find out more about my work, please visit catherineingram.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Cath Ingram for notice of additional podcasts and other ruminations. Till next time.